what's happened this year is that they're really, say, the past almost year and a half now, a lot of selling on the retail level, some of which I've got confirmation from wholesalers that some of the coins and bars that are being sold back actually being melted down and used for industrial use. Well, hello there, my friends. Chris Marcus here with you for Arcadia Economics. Do hope you're doing well out there as we get set for the holidays, or maybe you've already been celebrating the holidays, but either case, just want to wish everyone a great holiday season. Hope you're happy and healthy and safe out there, and just getting ready to spend some time with your family and appreciate the things that have gone well this year. And for today's show, I actually had something that I recorded with Sean from the SGT Report last week, and ended up being a really fun interview. It was nice to take some questions, talk about what happened this year. Also, in particular, dig into why, despite the movement in gold, silver has risen a fair amount, actually, although why it hasn't risen even in the past 15 years more than it has. So we dig into that as well, and hope you enjoy this one. And we'll have a little bit of a lighter schedule over the next week and a half, but anything big happens, we'll keep you posted. And we have a few things coming up, but anyway, here is today's show.
You're embracing crypto, very different from the previous administration. Strategic Petroleum Reserve like for crypto?
Yeah, I think so. We're going to do something great with crypto because we don't want China or anybody else, and not just China, but others are embracing it, and we want to be the head.
Hey friends, welcome back. Sean from SGT Report. That was the one, the only Donald J. Trump today ringing the bell at the New York Stock Exchange talking about cryptocurrencies and Bitcoin. My friend Chris Marcus from Arcadia Economics is brave enough to come on and talk about all of it, Bitcoin, silver, and gold. And by the way, Michael Saylor is saying some pretty crazy things. He wants the United States to divest of its gold in order to buy more Bitcoin. Have we jumped the shark, or is this the new normal? Friends, we have a lot to cover today. Thanks so much for tuning in. Before we start, just a quick word about our sponsor. Citigroup's latest prediction, gold to rocket past $3,000 an ounce by 2025. Think about that number, $3,000. While Wall Street scrambles, here's what they won't tell you. That isn't just a prediction, it's a wake-up call. Look at the national debt clock. Every day you wait could cost you. Smart investors are already moving because they see what's coming. A golden tide that could lift some boats while leaving others high and dry. Now, there are no investment guarantees of any kind, so always do your own due diligence. But where will you be when gold hits $3,000 an ounce? Celebrating or wishing you'd listened? Noble Gold Investments is your bridge to the future, your partner in preparation, your guide to what's coming. Don't let 2025 be your what-if moment. Be ready, be positioned, be confident, and visit noblegoldinvestments.com right now to get 10 1-ounce silver American Eagle coins with a qualified account, because $3,000 gold won't wait for permission. noblegoldinvestments.com. The link is below. Hey friends, welcome back. Thank you so very much for tuning in. It's Sean from SGT Report. Guys, I might just title this one Global Insurrection Against Bankster Occupation. Of course, that is a quote by the great Max Kaiser, who's now a very big Bitcoin guy. But the fact of the matter is, back in the day, Max Kaiser knew the truth. To crush JP Morgan, we the people just need to buy physical silver. Because, guys, we are running out of physical silver, as you all know. We're going to talk about that and so much more today with my friend Chris Marcus from Arcadia Economics. Welcome back, Chris.
Hey there, Sean, and happy holidays to you and everyone watching. Nice to be back here with you, and certainly what has been a great year for gold and silver. I know some people are still disappointed because we're not at $50 silver, although, Sean, really, when you think about it, aside from 1980 and 2011, this is really the biggest move we've seen, which if you actually mark year to year, you might find different percentages, but when you look at scope of move, so good year for the metals, and it's always nice to be here with you as well.
Well, it's always nice to have you, my friend, and we'll point out to the audience that gold just yesterday or the day before hit a new all-time high when priced in USD. It pierced $2,700 for a brief period of time. Today, as we're having this conversation, it's down $48. And, of course, silver slammed again, down 4% today to $31. That is the salt in the wound, my friend. And just to set the stage and remind our listeners why this continues to happen, I'll play this clip from my friend David Jensen, who's been on the show many times. This is what's going on, folks, at the LBMA. This is what's going on to kneecap the prices of gold and, yes, even more, silver on a daily basis.
I just can't think of anything that even compares to the scale of this. Mm-hmm. And the discussion is getting quite widespread now. It's not just guys with tinfoil hats discussing it. It's guys like reading the documents in London and saying, well, what do you mean? You gave oversight to the Bank of England. And what do you mean that it's self-regulating? You created regulations, but they're voluntary. And what do you mean that they're trading gold and silver and that they're promissory notes? And what do you mean you're trading 200 million ounces of gold a day in London when 120 million ounces are mined globally every year? And how can you trade 3 billion ounces of silver a day in London when you're mining like 830 million ounces a year? Like, it just, right? You don't have to be a conspiracy theorist or somebody who's mentally unstable. You just have to have a guy that reads their documents and then says, I have a question. I'm wondering if you can answer this question.
All right, I'm coming back to my friend Chris. You know who's reading those documents? Not just you, me, and David Jensen. People in India, power brokers in Russia, power brokers in China. They're reading the documents and they know what's up. There is a run on metal at the LBMA because they don't have it. Again, a paper charade in the West. Tell the audience about it, Chris.
Yeah, well, Sean, in addition to some of the groups that you mentioned that are hearing about it, I would add that also institutional investors are hearing about it, because what David was talking about in that clip, and I've met David before and he's a great analyst, so everything he's saying there is accurate, although it's not, we're past the point where it's just folks like David and you and I who are talking about it. TD Securities earlier this year put out a research paper saying the next silver squeeze is on the way and that it's not going to be like the last one, but they were talking about the rate at which the deficit is depleting inventories. And just for people who may not be familiar, we saw the COMEX silver and gold inventories really start coming down around that time of silver squeeze back in 2021. Then there was a big drop off in the LBMA vaults, as you mentioned. That has subsided. So it was kind of like the first year was the COMEX, then shifted over to LBMA. And what's happened this year is that they're really, say, the past almost year and a half now, a lot of selling on the retail level, some of which I've got confirmation from wholesalers that some of the coins and bars that are being sold back actually being melted down and used for industrial use. So we have seen a lot of metal drained. I wouldn't say we're on red alert of something happening tomorrow yet. The Silver Institute has reported deficits over the past 3 years, or if you include the ETFs and the investment demand that goes in there, you have deficits over the past 5 years, on track for one of the larger deficits this year. And add in that for people who don't follow the mining stocks, we've had a rebound in the prices of the metals, but the mining equities have still been getting pummeled. It's not like capital is flowing in there. So you do have a situation set up where I keep trying to figure out, well, how else does this get resolved? Because even if you have money pour into the mining sector, you're talking anywhere from 5 to 20 years before projects go from where they are to actually bringing silver out to the world. So yeah, that's what we've been seeing. And certainly this year, obviously a lot of central bank gold demand. Have not seen as much of an investment surge on the silver side, although the Russian government in their new draft federal budget did mention that in addition to adding gold and platinum and palladium and precious stones to their state fund, that they're also going to be adding silver. They didn't say how much and the exact plans, but one of the things that I'm keeping an eye on, where you would think if a lot of central banks are adding gold, is there some point at which silver $32 while gold's up 2,700? And Sean, if I may correct you, we actually hit 2,800 in the futures about a month or so ago. So we've been even above the 2,700 level. Silver is still below its all-time high, and we can dig into why I think that is in a little bit if you want, but hopefully that at least adds some context on what David was saying there.
Yeah, and it's interesting to note, as you just did, that Russia announced it will buy silver now for its own treasury, and it would not take much to move the needle. Again, as Jensen noted in that clip, the Wall Street banksters are selling, in some cases, $3 billion of silver into the market per day, paper silver. There's only 840 million ounces of physical mined globally in a year. Meanwhile, they sell 200 million ounces of gold per day via paper when there's only 120 million ounces of gold mined per year. This has got to be the world's largest Ponzi scheme. Chris, people call Bitcoin a Ponzi scheme. We'll talk about Bitcoin later. I'll play a clip of Michael Saylor, and he's got kind of a crazy idea, one that I actually do not agree with, and I think he's quite brilliant. But people call Bitcoin a Ponzi. Why don't we point the finger at the paper bankers, the terrorists, the bankster occupation, which we the people need to end? Let's talk about that Ponzi scheme. 3 billion ounces of paper silver a day sold by these vampiric bankers? These people need to be thrown in jail.
Well, how do you really feel about it, Sean?
I feel strongly, brother. They're keeping we the people down. The man is keeping us down.
Well, I know exactly what you mean, and if it helps, I see out there on Twitter in certain circles, there's debate over are the metals manipulated, or is that fact or fiction? Is that relevant or not? We'll point out that back in, I think it was 2020, JP Morgan was fined $920 million by the CFTC. I think you're also aware of that interview I did with Bart Chilton a couple of years ago, where he talked plenty about the violations. And also another thing that I can send you a link if you want to add it. There were some Deutsche Bank transcripts that they got caught doing some shady stuff a couple of years earlier, and they released a lot of the conversations between the traders. One of which was, I think, May 11th. It was early May of 2011, and there's one day where you hear, and this is interbank. It was in the thing will say like Deutsche Bank trader A to UBS trader B, let's go smash it together. And there was a comment, something like that, on the same day where the price went from 39 to 35 as it was coming back down on its way to 50. So, there's a degree to which it's been noted. There are a couple JP Morgan guys in jail. I think it was also frustrating because I don't know. I know different people get different levels of satisfaction that someone's in jail or not, to the degree that I think people would have had a valid claim. Was there spoofing going on April 30th into May 1st, the day that silver came down from $50, and to the degree that that could have cost people money? I actually talked with a legal group that has had some success in some whistleblower cases. And by the time that the CFTC finally acknowledged all this happening in 2020, when there were people like Ted Butler and others who were screaming about it for years, the lawyer said that, well, the statute of limitations has passed by the time the CFTC acknowledged that it was that in their words that JP Morgan had spoofed precious metals and treasuries hundreds of thousands of times. So there's that part that's on the record and is what it is. And then what do you do with that? I mean, on some level, is it frustrating? Is it an ideal system? I would say no, yet to the degree of this is the way the system is now, and trying to figure out why things work the way they do, and more importantly, what will happen going forward. I mean, we've always seen large amounts of paper like that, and I've always imagined that what would be the break point would be some sort of crisis or an event. And I mentioned the conditions in the supply and demand in silver. So now, can I guarantee today that we're going to reach a shortage? No. Would I say that if I could draw up the conditions that could facilitate making that happen, or making something happen similar to what we've seen in the cocoa market? And let me know if you need me to explain briefly what happened there. But you had a short squeeze where years of a structural deficit, and then basically they didn't have enough chocolate, so the price surged up. Are we on track for something like that? Yeah, the conditions sure are in place. To put that in fair context, we did have a drawdown of the silver inventories for about 15 straight years from 1990 to 2005. And then there were some advances as the price went up and mine production went up from about 2005. And we were running a surplus until 2020. Now that's changed in recent years. So what I'm pointing out, we don't know exactly how these things are going to play out, but certainly you have something like that. If let's say that perhaps the investing world, whether that includes central banks or not, what if they have a change in perception to silver, similar to what we've seen with gold over the past 5, 10 years, where I would suggest that if you had said even 4 or 5 years ago that central banks are going to be buying because they're that concerned about sanction risk and seeing what can happen to their reserve asset if they do something that the US or the West doesn't like. So there's a much different perception in gold today than there was 5 years ago. Could that same thing happen in silver? If the war, let's say things in Ukraine between the West and Russia and the East escalates, would, if I were doing military strategy, which is far out of my domain, but we've seen China last week just restrict certain critical minerals to the US. Is the silver market, especially in a world that continues to promise to go green, is that a strategic vulnerability? I continue to read articles about how we're very close, if not at the point where now the way manufacturing has been leaving the country over the past 2 decades, that it's almost well, if we need to go to war against China, are we asking them whether they can still send us the parts to make the weapons? So is silver a vulnerable point? It would seem like a candidate. Hopefully it doesn't get to that. So a lot of different probabilities that you price in, and yet with the rise in the central banks buying gold, if you look at the 2023 data at how much investment silver was sold, how much investment gold was sold, according to World Gold Council and Silver Institute, comes out to about $128 billion in 2023 went into gold, and about $6 billion went into silver. Half of that 128 billion was central banks, so let's call that 64, 65 billion dollars went in there. So let's say that the central banks at some point, whether they look at it as a reserve or an investment, or for whatever reason, if they come to a similar conclusion that we've now seen Russia do, which is the first on the board on a government or central bank level to do that. If we said that the central bank said, instead of putting 65 billion worth in to gold, we'll take 10% and put that into silver, now all of a sudden you're doubling the amount of silver investment demand. Mm-hmm. And you quickly get into a gap. I mean, Sean, I think you probably heard about that new Samsung electric vehicle battery.
No, I've not, but let me just say something. One of the issues with a central bank or any nation state trying to add silver in mass to its treasury to back their currency is that the price, because of the suppression, is too low. Silver has essentially been demonetized, so it is a tiny, tiny, tiny asset class because of the manipulation keeping the price at $32. Let me just show folks this, and we'll come back to the Samsung battery thing. But here's what's going on, folks. Now, this comes from James Anderson and my buddies over at SD Bullion. The New York overnight versus intraday versus New York Silver Open. The black line is the New York Silver Open, going all the way back to 1970 when Nixon took us off the gold standard. The blue line is the overnight. This is overseas trading. This is where silver would be if Wall Street didn't exist. Silver would be around $380 or $400 per ounce. If that was the case, then it would be a viable asset for nation states, for pension funds, for corporations to add silver to their balance sheet. But at $30, it's really fairly worthless, guys. And you know what the salt in the ointment really is, Chris? I'm coming back to you. It's that chart that I see all the time. And I see it in the Bitcoin circles, where Bitcoin passed silver in market cap. And that chart always notes a total silver global value, a market of 1.2 trillion, 1.1 trillion. I always laugh at that. That is such a joke. When they only mine 840 million ounces of silver per year, call it 1 billion ounces. Multiply it by the price of $32 an ounce. That's $32 billion. It's a joke, Chris. That's my whole point. So when we talk about this, silver sooner or later it'll break out past 50, I'm not going to even get excited when it hits 55. This thing needs to be hundreds of dollars per ounce to hit real world equilibrium. Meanwhile, Elon, quote unquote, richest man on planet Earth, he gets the free silver subsidy because of the manipulation, so he can sell Teslas at $30,000 and become the world's richest man. By the way, Tesla, it's far more than a car company, folks. If you think Tesla's a car company, I got news to share with you. it's got a lot more going on than cars, and that's why the stock is hitting new all-time highs again. If silver was priced at 400, how much would a Tesla cost? Could we start there, Chris?
Well, it'd be a bit more expensive. And Sean, did you also happen to catch, it was either this year or last year, but Elon has said that he could fix the energy grid in the US with a 100 by 100 mile massive solar grid. Did you hear of that one?
You know what? He's got some brilliant ideas. And by the way, if he's a real guy who's doing all this stuff on a daily basis, launching rockets into quote unquote space, he's got the Boring Company, he's got the self-driving automobiles. I mean, this guy's got his hands in everything. He's also got Donald J. Trump's hand and ear. I mean, who is this guy? He's like one of the Avengers or something. He's like a cartoon character. I like him. He seems really personable. But what's this guy's real deal here, Chris? Elon Musk, king of the universe.
I don't know that I have the inside scoop on Elon, although I'll say it's pretty darn fascinating how quickly it happened where he went from doing what he's doing to now being not just in the administration, but seemingly a key role. And gee, I would say that at least the things that they're talking about doing, I don't know how smoothly they're going to go, but certainly setting us up for what could be really the biggest period of economic change, Sean, in your and my lifetime. Is that fair to say if they actually implement the tariff plans as they've been suggesting, which I don't know if that's necessarily a said and done thing, but
well, no, I agree with
that
you.
and the Doge board where you can do that. And on one hand, cutting wasteful spending, I'm all for it, but I don't think it's going to be like, well, you just cut it. Now the balance sheet's fine. I mean, there's going to be some consequences to that.
Well, I'm calling it American Renaissance 2.0. Because if you literally put America first and you get us out of the United Nations and you get us out of the World Health Organization and you end regulations on small business, which is strangling small business, if you truly put America first, you can turn this ship around right quick. And by the way, I thought it was super interesting. I did not expect. See, Donald J. Trump is such an alpha male. He actually warned the BRICS. You will never usurp the US dollar as world's reserve currency. And if you try to do so, have fun finding another trading partner because you will never do trade with the United States again. That's the kind of power the man wields because he knows what's up. And we still have the world's biggest economy, Chris. That's a mighty weapon to wield. And what was Joe Biden doing? He was burning it all down on purpose. You know, all this man has to do is get into office, turn on the Keystone XL pipeline, release the federal lands for oil and gas drilling. We'll be energy independent again within half a year. Do you remember when he was running for president, he pledged to the American people, get ready, within the first year, your energy bills will be reduced by 50%. I actually think that's possible under a Trump administration.
Yeah, and Sean, if I may share something else that could be worthy if you have not seen that is along with what you're saying in terms of Trump coming in. Here's Scott Bessent, President-elect Donald Trump's nominee for Secretary of Treasury. I also felt very strongly that we're in the midst of a great realignment and of a Bretton Woods realignments coming in terms of global policy, global trade. And I'd like to be a part of it, either on the inside or the out. So we've had J.D. Vance talking about he's coming around to a Ron Paul school of thought on the Fed. Ron Paul has, I know they were talking about doing an interview, but Elon has reached out to him on a cost-cutting board. We heard that news first. It was a Senator Cynthia Lummis, I believe. Trump has also talked about Bitcoin Strategic Reserve Fund.
That's right.
You have Judy Shelton, who has just written a book on gold, former Trump economic advisor, and she's talking about gold-backed bonds. It's still early, but in an interesting time where, especially if personally, I feel we're getting very close to the point where kicking the can down the road, you're running out of road. And perhaps more significantly, I think there's a degree to which even inside Washington and the people who make decisions wherever they may reside, I think there's also an awareness and acceptance on their part. And if there's And I'm not going to go out here and say a gold reset coming yet. I'm a big Luke Gromen fan, and he talks a lot about how you could cut spending, but if you don't get the debt to GDP down first, right now you can say we're going to grow, but if your debt to GDP is going up, you're just tacking on debt even faster than you're growing. So something has to be done about that. And if you accept that the inflation is coming, the damage has already been done, and it's now, do you structure things in a right order? One of which could be a revaluation of gold, which is in the Federal Reserve's accounting manual. And we heard Cynthia Loomis in her bill actually reference that. That was part of the way that they were going to fund the strategic Bitcoin fund, by revaluing the Federal Reserve gold certificates, which puts money into the Treasury's account. And I think it's you knock out about $1 trillion of debt for every $1,000 or $4,000 you raise the gold price, which I think brought us to about 144,000. You could cover the whole thing if you use that to pay down the debt, which is mechanically possible.
Well, you know what's interesting about that? Okay, we're going to circle back to the Bitcoin Strategic Reserve Bill in a second, but what's really interesting about that number you just threw out, what was that number for gold? 140,000, did you say?
Somewhere around 140, 150,000,
Okay.
36 times 4,
Yep, listen to this.
144.
So my friend Sophia Smallstorm just released a new newsletter about silver, and she quotes me in the newsletter in part because
You're an analyst now. I like it.
no, but in part
Not just
because of
a
a
host
video I
anymore.
did back in around 2010 featuring Adrian Douglas of GATA. And
You got to talk to him?
Yeah, well, listen to this. At that time, Adrian Douglas noted, based on his research, that the paper to physical gold ratio at the bullion banks was 45 to 1. So 45 ounces of paper for every 1 ounce of gold in the vault. I think it's far worse than that now. It's probably closer to at least 100 to 1. But based on that number then and a roughly $900 gold price when I did that video, it got us up to about $45,000 gold. But at today's price, $2,700 gold times that 45 ounces of paper, that gets us to $118,000 per ounce of gold. That would be the real world price today if all of the manipulation was counted for. If we took all the paper and we backed it by real gold, it would be 118,000. That gets us pretty close to your number you just mentioned, 140,000. So we're not just throwing out fake numbers here. These are the real numbers, and it really showcases the level of manipulation under which we toil. The paper manipulation. We're drowning in a sea of paper, Chris. And so that's the weird part. That's the part that we have to get through. That's the part the markets need to figure out. Meanwhile, Michael Saylor, the
Sean,
guy... Yes.
Could I just make one comment on what you just said before we touch on Bitcoin?
You bet.
So, Sean, the key thing is that is there manipulation that's been proven in court? But where I think that certainly I experience and that I know a lot of other people experience is that when we're thinking about in terms of how much paper, how many dollars are out there versus how many ounces, then yes, it becomes a simple fraction. And if you want to make the argument based on what was written into the Constitution and the Coinage Act of 1792, I'm all on board. Where I think it's helpful just to remember for people who are tracking this is that whether there's what we think should happen, what we think is right or fair, and there's what is. And obviously right now we are not on the gold standard, which now could things change? And are there things happening in the eastern half of the world that could we be getting closer to that? And are we in a situation that's perhaps where that now would actually solve a lot of problems that don't seemingly have any other easy solution? There might be some pain, but I think that it is becoming a more realistic option. Although just in terms of when people are thinking of they're buying gold or buying silver and what they're expecting it to do, hopefully that just, if we went to a gold revaluation, or if the BRICS started, or other countries outside of the BRICS started trading oil in gold rather than in treasuries, then a lot of these things could change. So there's moving parts.
Well, can I jump in, though, and just say, you know what needs to
Yeah.
happen? Because this country is never going to fix the silver price. And when I say fix it, they fix it every day. They're never going to let silver find its real world price and equilibrium. They're not going to. The only way that's going to happen is if China and India and Russia buy enough silver on an annual basis to break the back of the LBMA and to break the back of the COMEX. Stand for delivery. Drain these warehouses of the physical silver because there's not that much of it. That's the point, Chris, because it's never going to happen. We've been waiting since what? I bought my first ounces of silver in 2007. We've been at this a long time, and we have not been rewarded for what we thought was our prescience to get a physical.
Come on, $10 this year doesn't do it for you.
No, it doesn't. I'll tell you what, I'm in Bitcoin, and that brings me to Bitcoin. And Michael,
Although I am sorry again for interrupting, but I will bet you're ahead overall on your silver holdings at this point.
yeah, but you know what? I was buying the top. I was buying at 40, 45. Remember back in 2012 when it almost hit a new all-time high? So sure, I'm upside down on some of the silver. I'm in profit on most of the silver, but it's not been a good reward. Anybody would have done better in Nvidia, Apple, Tesla, Google, MicroStrategy, right? And we're just waiting for our day in the sunshine. And by the way, I think this is a bridge too far. Okay, Michael Saylor, brilliant guy, graduated #1 in his class at MIT. Obviously a brilliant guy. I think this is an insane idea. I have to empathize with Peter Schiff on this one. I'm going to play the clip, then I'm going to tell you why I think it's insane.
So the very simple idea is buy 20 or 25% of the Bitcoin network on behalf of the U.S. government, catalyze the development of that World Reserve Capital Network, and then let all the Chinese and the Russians and the foreigners sell all their other assets and buy Bitcoin, and then the money flows into the United States. If you want to put a great twist on it, dump your gold, sell all the U.S. gold, buy Bitcoin, then the trade is free because you could buy 5 million Bitcoin for the cost of the gold. You will demonetize the entire gold asset class, and our enemies hold gold in their banks, so their assets would go to zero. Our assets would go to $100 trillion, and we would control the world's reserve capital network as well as the world's reserve currency network.
Okay, he's a lot smarter than me, but here's why I think that's a little bit insane. This nation prints the money. They don't need to sell the gold to buy Bitcoin. If Trump wants to make Bitcoin part of a strategic reserve, as Cynthia Loomis does, and she introduced the Bitcoin Strategic Reserve Bill, if that happens, this government can just buy Bitcoin. It doesn't need to sell the gold. And as I've always said, Chris, people think I'm crazy to own Bitcoin. I advised people to dip a foot in the pool back in November 2015, and I was a slow adopter. I had people on the show that were recommending Bitcoin at 10, at 50. I didn't even know how to buy it, and I was bombastic about it, right? I'm like, Bitcoin is a PSYOP, this is CIA, whatever. The thing is this. I've always advocated having a foot in the pool, like diversify, but I would never sell my gold. I would never sell my silver at 30, 35 bucks. And I think it's kind of crazy for Michael Saylor to suggest that the U.S. divest out of its gold to buy Bitcoin. Why not own both?
No, I mean, I think that's actually a great concept. I'm glad you brought that up because you see it a lot in gold versus Bitcoin. I also saw recently an argument of is silver just an industrial metal or is silver still a monetary metal? I mean, when you're talking about a marketplace, you're talking about the summation of all of the participants, all the users, everyone, any stakeholders involved. And I've talked with people that, it's Bitcoin, nothing else, no other altcoins, and they don't want to hear anything else. And I'm guessing that there's very little that will change that view. Similarly, I know gold and silver people who have probably neither of them are going to change. Now, there's some overlap in the middle where, like you said, they can have both. And I think there's certainly a value in the idea of if we live in the world we do today, which is largely a digital world, and if I want to send you something for $2,023, am I shaving off the right amount of a gold and silver coin? So there are different tools of which I think there's use for both of them. Now, aside from what I think is right or should happen, does the government have the ability to use Bitcoin? And I've been reading, again, that's another thing Luke mentioned in his column, that apparently Trump is very big on Bitcoin right now. I know his view was different back in 2016. In fact, Sean, you probably remember that CFTC meeting back then. What was it? I forget, Commissioner Giancarlo, who talked about how the untold success of the Trump administration was that they popped the Bitcoin bubble, which was the first bubble they saw going back to the housing bubble. And that was, he said Trump was part of it. So it seems like his view is much different now than it was then. But I hear that he's very pro Bitcoin. And I know that with Tether is purchasing a lot of treasuries. I don't know if this is entirely accurate. It came from a source that I trust, but is it possible that as the Bitcoin price goes higher, that can be used to fund treasury debt?
Sorry for this quick interruption and a quick word about a sponsor. Most guys think their testosterone is being drained by aging, bad genetics, or maybe a lack of exercise. But what if I told you that's not the case? In fact, the real culprit is something you're eating every day. And here's the shocking part. It's something you've always been told is healthy. The food in question has been scientifically shown to devastate testosterone levels, and most men have no idea. And just eating it a few times a week is enough to wreck your testosterone, drain your energy, and crush your motivation. But there's good news. Cutting this one thing out of your diet could completely transform the way you feel. And guys who stopped eating it are building muscle, burning fat, and feeling more energized than they have in years. It's truly incredible how quickly things can change once you know what to avoid. And V-Shred has created a video that reveals exactly what this testosterone-killing food is and why removing it from your diet today could be the key to unlocking your body's true potential. It has been for mine. Yep, that's me. So if you want to know what this food is, head over to sculptnation.com/SGT. Again, that's sculptnation.com/SGT and watch the video or just click the link below. V-Shred's experts break it all down, and this one simple change could make all the difference. This is one thing you don't want to miss. The link is below.
Is it possible that as the Bitcoin price goes higher, that can be used to fund treasury debt?
Yes, that's exactly what I think is going on. It took me a long time to figure this out, but that is the logical conclusion I've arrived at. And so a lot of people will say, when the tether bubble pops, that will spell the end for Bitcoin. What I think they're missing is this. I think this whole thing may have been concocted, maybe by the NSA, maybe by some shadow state, maybe by white hats within the shadow state. I'm not sure, but Satoshi Nakamoto is the pseudonym for whoever came up with the Bitcoin protocol, right? It's a piece of software. It's brilliant code. And it allows we the people to trade money between ourselves outside of the central banking system. That's the beauty of it. It allows us to take our money from nation to nation. Okay, we don't need to take our gold bars and get them confiscated at the airport. That's the beauty of Bitcoin. But what I'm starting to suspect is what you just said is right. This thing will be used, Tether will be used to buy up the U.S. treasuries, the debt that's issued, that China, Russia, India, nobody wants it anymore. Japan, nobody wants it. So Tether's buying it up, and then they buy Bitcoin with their 6%, 7%, 5% interest that they get for holding the treasuries. And it's a feedback loop that's endless. This could go on forever, and this is how we could get to $1 million, or as Michael Saylor predicts, a $13 million Bitcoin price, and the dollar doesn't die. I know it sounds like insanity, but that seems to be the plan, Chris.
Although, Sean, here's the thing that again, and first of all, it goes back to Saylor or Trump or whoever. You can like it, you cannot like it. Would I rule out that they'll do it? No. There's a lot of things that aren't for the best of humanity or the best of people. Does that mean a government's not going to do it, especially when their back's pressed against the wall? We know the answer to that. But the other question is that if that's correct, what you just said, and I believe it is, what happens if the Bitcoin price goes down?
Yeah, sorry, I was muted. No, that certainly could happen. The Bitcoin price will go up and down. It's very, very volatile. In fact, just the other day when it hit a new all-time high of 103,000 and change, that same day or the day later, it went back down to like 93. It was a $10,000 candle in a day. And then within a day again, it was back up to 100,000. So the volatility, and by the way, that's the market makers. There's so little Bitcoin out there because of the supply-demand ratio. It's so out of whack. There's only 450 Bitcoin mined per day globally. Meanwhile, the ETFs are eating up 4,000 Bitcoin a day on average. Between BlackRock, Fidelity, ARK, and the other ETFs, they're gobbling up 4,000, north of 4,000 Bitcoin per day when the whole global mining supply is 450. So that's the market makers. They're taking out people's stops, right? They're taking out the stops. They can see the stops. So they're stealing the Bitcoin from people who have stop sells in. So if it's at 103,000 and you put your stop sell at 95,000 because you're like, oh yeah, I just want my profits. If they're going to take it back down to 60, I'll sell at 95. Well, guess what? They just took your Bitcoin and they gave it to BlackRock. So this will continue to be volatile, but it might be volatile all the way up to 1 million, all the way up to 10 million, all the way up to 50 million. These are some of the predictions some of the smartest people in the room are making, Chris. I mean, it sounds like insanity, but, I guess I empathize with Peter Schiff. That poor guy. He must cry himself to sleep at night. He had Max Kaiser screaming at him in his living room to buy Bitcoin at $1. and he didn't do it.
Oh wow. Oh, and Sean, don't forget, we're now we're recording December 12th, so less than a month to go till the next debt ceiling situation when they start doing accounting fraud to keep extending the amount of money they have, which that limit which was just suspended a year and a half ago. And obviously in the time since, nothing has happened in terms of actually cutting spending. Although I guess nothing has happened. We have conceivably the Doge board, so but you get to a point where it's like all these balls juggling in the air. I don't know which one it will be, but as a student of probabilities, you start stacking these things up. Add on Oxford Economics forecast 46% growth in industrial usage of silver over the next decade. So we'll see how it goes, but I would imagine that somewhere in there, usually when you have a crisis, that is what actually gets people buying gold and silver. From someone that used to be involved with a gold and silver dealership when you had the Nikkei down 12% one day, when the banks were collapsing because of their treasury positions in 2023. So, we'll see when it is. I guess each day on some level we get closer, but and some of that's been reflected in the pricing this year. And the idea that 10 or 20 years from now we're going to be talking about whether silver is between 15 or 25 bucks is not going to happen. Because one last note, if I could toss in there, and that was a long answer, great interview a couple of months ago with the CEO of Silvercrest Metals, recently purchased by Core, known as one of the lower cost producers. And they did a study because most companies publish what's known as cash costs and all-in sustaining costs, neither of which include everything. And one of the lower cost silver producers, they did a study that did include everything, which we were starting a project now and had to do all of it. How much should we spend? How much were the ounces? He said they were already at $25 pre-tax. So the mining floor is going up. Now you could, I don't know, could they hammer a bunch of paper on the silver price, get it to 25, or I don't think we'll see $20 silver again myself, unless it's for a flash crash for a day or two. But
hold that thought. Breaking from First Coast News out of Florida, gold and silver could become official currency in Florida. State's top financial officer says. Florida Chief Financial Officer Jimmy Patronis announced he's launching a study to see if gold and silver bullion can be used as legal tender. Let's play this and then we'll read a little bit more.
Gold and silver bullion could soon be used as a legal way for Floridians to buy goods and services. Chief Financial Officer Jimmy Patronis made that announcement today. Currently, gold and silver can be bought as an investment, but not used to buy things in Florida. Right now, 11 states in the country do allow gold and silver as legal tender.
Some of those 11 states include, I can scroll down.
Texas also had a similar announcement to what you're mentioning about Florida, which is where I am. And I saw that, I think it just came out yesterday or sometime in the last couple of days. But yeah, Texas had a similar announcement a week or two ago.
Yeah, and some of the other states that allow gold and silver as legal tender, tax-free, by the way, Louisiana, Texas, as Chris notes, South Carolina, West Virginia, Florida might be added to the list. And that kind of brings me back to what Saylor was saying that I disagree so strongly with. Can you imagine the idea of thinking that Bitcoin alone could demonetize the world's gold and silver? That would be a Ponzi scheme bubble, because I'm going to tell you this. I've always said this about Bitcoin. If it corrected to the point where it was back down to $100 a Bitcoin, Chris, you might decide to buy 100 of them. People would buy it, right? If gold went back down to what, $100 an ounce because it was being demonetized by Bitcoin, people would turn to gold and silver. I mean, they can't take it to zero, is my point. So I think Saylor's a bit misguided there, and he might be talking his book. By the way, he owns about as much Bitcoin as anybody in the world. The only people that own more Bitcoin than Saylor's MicroStrategy are Satoshi Nakamoto and now BlackRock. But Bitcoin, game theory might kick in. Game theory is this, Chris. If the U.S. government does begin to acquire Bitcoin and add it to the balance sheet, that's a first mover advantage. Every other nation state must follow. Every other nation state must follow. If Trump really does this, it is going to inflate the Bitcoin bubble to nosebleed valuations. That's why I continue to tell people, consider dipping a foot in the pool. consider having some exposure to this asset class, because I think the genie's out of the bottle, and I don't think there's any stopping it. I could be wrong. David Jensen disagrees with me strongly. The same David Jensen whose clip we played earlier in this video. He says Bitcoin is eventually going to zero, as many people in this space have said, including Peter Schiff. But they've been wrong since 2009 when Satoshi released the white paper. So, game theory.
You're embracing crypto, very different from the previous administration. Strategic petroleum reserve like for crypto?
Yeah, I think so. We're going to do something great with crypto because we don't want China or anybody else, and not just China, but others are embracing it, and we want to be the head.
What do you think happens if the United States government under Donald Trump begins to buy Bitcoin publicly when they already have 200,000 Bitcoin on the balance sheet?
Well, I think you had some great points in there that certainly if the government wants to do that, I do believe there's a way that they can do that. So then it comes down to it's a choice. And is it possible that they choose that, especially with not a lot of great remaining options when the debt is piling up, the interest expense is piling up, and you're already past the point where you can grow your way out of it? I don't think you can rule it out. And I think the way you put it into context that, if you had 1% or whatever percent it is, I mean, there's some degree to which do I think at 100,000 is the best point to lever up and mortgage your house to do it? No, because similar even in Weimar Germany when the currency was hyperinflating, if you had been on gold, you would have gotten stopped on margin. You would have gotten stopped out a couple of times. So if we're talking about really something of this magnitude, there's going to be a lot of volatility. So by all means, factor that in. And just to touch on the other great point that you mentioned in there were more than two great points, Sean, in every sentence you say, obviously. But here's the thing with
I talk too much. You know it, brother.
No. I love my Sean phone calls. I get Sean texts every once in a while and talk about fun stuff. I've actually even seen your face, so I feel in a
well, we're kindred spirits. We're kindred spirits. By the way, you want to talk about Bitcoin volatility? I mean, this is the market makers taking out the stops. It went as high as 102.5. It's down $2,500 in a matter of moments. It is the volatility, and that's what makes it an interesting asset. For one, it's not for the faint of heart, to be sure. But just so folks know, if you get into Bitcoin at this point, you're going to not like it. It is so volatile, and I'm used to the volatility. Like I said, there's a $10,000 candle to the downside just last week. But this is the market makers. Okay, they're taking out the stop sells because BlackRock is adding, on average, BlackRock alone is adding 2,250 Bitcoin per day since they launched their ETF 230 some days ago. So that's what's going on here, Chris.
Yeah, and Sean, just the last thing to touch on there is that you mentioned it, where maybe Michael Saylor turns out to be right. I don't know the answer to that. I don't know what the U.S. government's going to do. But there's also, to the counter to that, is China going? Michael Saylor can say whatever he wants, and he does. Is China going to listen to Michael Saylor? Is Vladimir Putin going to listen to Michael Saylor? I think they're going to do what they're going to do. And so far, China has been buying a lot of gold. So, like we were saying before, there's going to be altering views in the marketplace. Obviously, if the U.S. government tries to save their financial system on Bitcoin, that's going to have an impact, whether they're ultimately successful or not. And again, if they do go down that road, my question would be, and if the way that you and I described it before is how it's implemented and actually executed, I'd have the question, all right, what happens if the price comes down? Or are we just having the government fix the price so that it doesn't come down? So those are some topics that I would want to know at the press conference for that one. But still, you can't control everyone else in the world. Are the Saudis going to want to trade oil and Bitcoin? Maybe they will. Maybe to some degree they will. But the idea that maybe Michael Saylor wants, you could even say that he's right, that that's what they all should do, but that's different than saying that that's what they all will do. And I would suggest that there is a substantial amount of capital in the world, some of which is coming out of the Treasury market, that is going to probably look to both of those assets. We could debate the percentages, but is interest in gold and silver going to zero? No. And silver, even if you took out the investment demand, Well, if you took out the investment demand, you probably could be close to balancing supply and demand right now, but the prices of these are not going to zero. Hopefully that at least puts it in context with a good way to think about some of the things that you're hearing and how to incorporate that and make your own best decisions.
Well, yeah, and some folks will say, and I heard Mike Adams say this the other day, and I tried to politely correct him in the comments below his video posted on BitChute. Where I think he got it wrong was this. He was saying that Bitcoin, and he believes in Bitcoin. He owns, I think, a little bit of Bitcoin. When I say he believes in it, I think he believes in it as an asset class to hold as part of the diversification of an overall portfolio. But he was making the point that if Bitcoin went to $1 million a coin, it would make the dollar so worthless that he doesn't see it happening. And because basically his point was, what do you think a dollar's worth at $1 million Bitcoin? And where I pushed back gently was this. There's $900 trillion in assets on planet Earth comprising of stocks, bonds, and property, real estate.
There are $900 trillion of global assets, investable assets. Bitcoin is currently 1.7 trillion of those, which is 0.02% of total assets. It's 1/10 the size of gold. So it has a long way to go here, but at $90,000, it's still only 0.2% of the entire investment universe. Now remember, it's 1/10 the size of gold, but gold's been around for thousands of years. Bitcoin's been around for 15. This is tremendous momentum, but a huge amount of space here for it to start taking some allocations from those other areas. Where will it take allocations from? Well, the obvious one is gold. Second obvious one is equities. The third obvious one is bonds. And then the fourth obvious one is real estate. So it's going to kind of go in that order in my mind, that investors are going to start realizing that, oh, this is digital gold. Oh, I should, instead of having my money in just equities and bonds, I should have some in Bitcoin. Oh, instead of having all of my money in real estate, and instead of looking for real estate investment opportunities, forget about your home, I should buy some Bitcoin instead. Why? Because it's liquid. It's trustworthy. It has a tremendous rate of return over the course of just 4 years. Every single 4-year period, it has a rate of return. So that's another thing. And then just doing quick math on it, it's 0.2% right now. At 1% of the total global assets, Bitcoin's a $9 trillion asset and worth about $450,000 per coin. At 3%, it's worth $1.3 million per coin. So we have a long way to go. I don't know when we get to that $1 million level. I expect it to be in the next 7 years or so.
Imagine what that would do to the Bitcoin price. If people wanted to diversify out of stocks, out of bonds, and out of property, even to the degree that they had 5% exposure to Bitcoin, what would that do to the Bitcoin price? And by the way, the ultra-conservative shop, Charles Schwab, the woman from Charles Schwab was just on CNBC the other day, and when asked what they are recommending the allocation to their customers be for Bitcoin, she said at least 10%. 10%? What would 10% of 900 trillion be? That'd be a $90 trillion Bitcoin market cap. So this is what I'm talking about. Having some exposure to this asset class makes sense. First mover advantage. By the way, I wanted to show your website, Enough Bitcoin. I'm killing myself here because my audience.
Sean, could I get one other?
My audience hates Bitcoin. Go ahead.
Just since you're doing some calculations there, another thing I've thought about, there's about 330 million people in the U.S. If 10% of them bought 100 ounces of silver, so 100 ounces of silver, $32, we're talking about 3,200, and 10% of 330 million, so that's 10% of that is 33 million times 100 ounces each. That gets us to 3.6 billion ounces in a market where the supply, including mining and recycling, is about 1 billion ounces, but it's already in a deficit. So that's in terms of why silver hasn't moved more yet. The key thing to remember is we have not seen a surge in investment in physical silver. There is the deficit, and if that continues long enough, you will hit an issue. Now, a lot of silver has come back on the market this year because there's been a lot of selling. And at $50, I'm sure there will be more selling coming in. And as the price goes up, some of that metal will come out. But still, while we have seen the increase in people actually buying gold, especially on the central bank level, when people are saying, how come silver hasn't exploded yet? That's one of the things that I don't hear mentioned as often as I feel it should be, because we have not seen that in the data yet. Now that could change, and we talked about some of the ways that that could happen. But again, just as some numbers, I think I have all my decimal places right there. You'd be looking at about 10% of the population bought 100 ounces, 3.3 billion ounces in a market that's already in a deficit. Well, they're coming up with 1 billion ounces a year.
Yeah. Buy physical silver and kill the criminal occupiers, the bankers. All right, so this is Arcadia Economics. I wanted to show you guys Chris's site because he's got a really beautiful piece of art here for rich guys. Let's just be honest. This is for rich guys. But show me, do you have one on your desk there you can show people? I'm coming back to you, Chris. This is the coolest damn thing. I want to buy one, but again, this is for rich guys. Do I have that wrong? This is not a cheap device. It's made out of pure 999 silver. How many ounces of silver go into each one of these Ben choppers?
There's 26 ounces in each one, and I don't know if you have to be rich to buy one. The short story, we made these 3 years ago, and they're actually a lot more expensive. Plus, they were coming from outside of the U.S., and they would get hit with a big unknown customs bill. So they're not cheap to make. It's more than the price of silver. And if you're worried about the Fed cutting another 50 basis points next week, do not buy this as a hedge against silver. It's a toy, although, a darn fun one. And here you can see Ben, which capturing his famous moniker of, and he actually, Sean, as we talked about before we hit the record button today, as I was getting this ready, I was looking at, I was like, what exactly did he say about helicopter money? And he had written what I affectionately know as the 3 planks of the Bernanke Manifesto. This was for the Brookings Institute. And he was saying, what tools does the Fed have left? And yes, Sean, that's right. You do have the flight stick navigator inside the control panel that helps Ben fly through chimneys this year to little girls and boys who have been good, and explain his 3 planks, which are basically that what do we do if QE and
here is the silver chopper Ben Bernanke.
That is so cool.
So there we have Holter and Craig Hemke talking about it. But basically, if QE and 0% rates don't work, what do we do? He said negative interest rates, capping, longer term interest rates, yield curve control, or financial repression, whatever you want to call it. And then the third one, he actually talked about helicopter money. And he was saying, well, I don't think we'll get to that scenario, but if it comes to it, it should not be ruled out. Perhaps we got a taste of that back in 2020 a little bit, where we saw the government sending out checks. And either case, if you would like to laugh rather than cry at some of the insanity of what the Fed is doing, plus get your free Got Silver coffee mug. Anyway, we made these, and this was with finding a new manufacturer in the U.S. and getting the price down as much as we could. So again, if you're trying to hedge against inflation, this is not the way to do that. But if you're looking for a fun toy that could make you smile as we go through whatever the Fed has cooked up next, I bring to you, Sean, and the world, the Silver Chopper Ben.
I love it. I'd like to have one on my desk. I'm going to have to give this.
We've had requests for Yellen the Felon and a whole series of other ones. So I'll see. I personally think the SGT Sean action hero. And Sean, I'm gonna reveal some of your personal details. You might get mad at me here, but for anyone who doesn't know, Sean is a bit of a gym maven. So I did talk to my silversmith to see if we can capture the 6-pack abs and the ripped biceps just correctly in silver form. But
that's hilarious.
We could put sunglasses so still no one can see you.
Hey, I'm no Tom Fitton. Tom Fitton from Judicial Watch. That guy's ripped, and he wears the world's tightest shirt, so everybody knows it. No, hey, man, I'm just trying to fend off dad bod. I'm trying to fend off dad beer gut. So I like to go to the gym. No, I appreciate that. These are really, really cool. Really, really neat. That thing is sizable. 26 ounces of pure silver handcrafted into a Bernanke Money Go Burr chopper. I absolutely love it, Chris. That is really brilliant. Very, very cool.
Yeah, here's mine. If we can see him there. There he is flying out there, throwing the $100 bills. And as you can see, the propellers spin on the top and the back, if you can see that there through my Zoom screen. So
No, that's the ultimate
anyway, it
rich
was
guy's toy. I gotta say, that's the ultimate rich guy's toy. You know, every guy with a big strapping desk. These guys, these Bitcoin guys that go on camera all the time with their big strapping desks and their cool office spaces, and all these guys are in Bitcoin now, and they all talk to each other. They should each have one of those, just out of principle. Come on, let's start with honest money first, the real money first, silver and gold, then Bitcoin.
I do not believe there is a Bitcoin chopper Ben available on the marketplace, thereby showing the exclusivity of the chopper. So
No, it is exclusive. How many
advantage of silver over Bitcoin.
are you capping? How many pieces total? Are we talking 2,000, 200? I have no idea.
Oh, I don't know about that just yet. We just got started here, so it was
right.
just launched a week or two ago. Though we have sold a couple of them so far, and a few people are getting the first deliveries. They're handmade, so they're made after each person orders, and got a nice silversmith who does some beautiful work up in New York that I met. It's been a while we've been mapping it out, but anyway, people are enjoying them, and fun thing to talk about, smile a little bit, and appreciate you letting me share that. And hopefully we'll get one your way soon, Sean.
Silver chopper Ben
Oh,
Bernanke.
sorry, I wouldn't clicked on your page. It's auto playing again. Let's just show it though.
Tie flying in the wind while he throws out $100 bills.
Look at him getting ready to throw that money out there.
I see that.
Because that's what it looks like when
That
Ben
even looks
Bernanke-
like his sorry ass.
Look at the size of the bald silvery head.
Yeah.
It's enormous. Back propellers spin too.
That's pretty fun.
Bill looked like he couldn't handle that. I think he's gonna want one for Christmas.
I think we all do.
Bill.
We all do. All right, brother. I appreciate you very much. It's always good to catch up.
Yeah, and just think about it, Sean. You could get, what is it, 40 silver chopper bends per Bitcoin. That's going to be an important ratio, just like gold to silver ratio in the years ahead. So I hope that you'll be covering that on an ongoing basis as you read the news on your show each day.
Yeah, I will. In fact, what I'd like to do is maybe the price of the silver chopper bends will depreciate when priced in Bitcoin. And sooner or later, I'll be able to buy one of those chopper bends for pennies on the dollar when my Bitcoin goes to 1 million. We shall see. I don't know.
You should cover that market, Sean. It's going to be. You should cover that market. I think
I'll cover that market, because if Peter Schiff is right, I am holding a real turd that's going to zero tomorrow. It's called Bitcoin. I don't know. I presented the truth as I see it here on this broadcast, and we'll see where the chips fall. Our guest has been Chris Marcus, Arcadia Economics, a true friend of truth and a friend to me at SGT Report. Chris, we love you. Thanks, man.
Thanks so much, Sean. Talk to you soon.
All right, there he goes. Chris Marcus, Arcadia Economics. Guys, the links are below. We appreciate you very much. And I'll remind you every single day for free, check us out to get the real news, the antidote to CIA Mockingbird mainstream media lies at sgtreport.com. And until next time, may God bless you and yours. Bye-bye, friends.
Well, thank you, Sean. It was fun being on his show as always. And thank you, everyone at home and watching. Do appreciate you being here every day, and hope again that you are getting set to have a nice break with your family over the next couple of days and getting ready for the new year, which is almost here. Real quick before we wrap up, did want to thank Silver Viper, who brought us today's show. And fortunately, not some official news yet, but I know Steve did go to have a meeting with some of the groups that have been looking at doing a deal so that they can get back out there drilling. And we did get a brief update from Steve last week. And to find out a little bit more about where that stands, well, just click on the link that's coming your way now.